Some viewers asked me to discuss Israel's strikes on Iran and its unrestricted expansion of war. Honestly, I hesitate to talk about Middle East issues because they, like the Russia-Ukraine war, cost me followers. I mentioned in early videos that I used to be relatively pro-Israel, but I criticize Israel solely because Netanyahu's endless war expansion causes civilian casualties. As for Iran, I dislike theocratic states. I have no sympathy for figures like Khomeini or Khamenei. After learning my stance, many unsubscribe, downvote, or insult me in the comments. They cannot understand why I believe Saladin was more virtuous than the Crusaders and more deserving of Jerusalem, yet call Khomeini a charlatan. They also fail to grasp why I label Netanyahu a warmonger while disliking Khamenei even more. Isn't Iran on China's side? Aren't we all enemies of the US? Shouldn't we embrace each other? They further struggle to understand why I admire the Jewish people's efforts to rebuild their nation but criticize their greed in monopolizing Jerusalem and persecuting Palestinian civilians. They also cannot comprehend why, as a Chinese person, I despise Zelensky as a clown yet dislike Russia and condemn its aggressive invasions. These people see the world in black and white, demanding that a foreigner align perfectly with their stance and values. How is that possible? I am just an ordinary person who needs to maintain stable traffic and an audience on YouTube. But I hate lying, so I generally avoid discussing Middle East or Russia-Ukraine issues. Since I made this video, I will accept the cost of losing a few hundred followers and briefly discuss the Middle East. Israel's strikes on Iran have a simple motive. Netanyahu believes Trump is the president who most unconditionally supports his war expansion. Although Trump and the U.S. government verbally condemn him for striking Iran without notifying or obtaining U.S. authorization, they unconditionally support Israel, providing weapons and, if necessary, military protection. Just as Israel pursues a genocidal policy in Gaza, the U.S. government only occasionally issues verbal warnings while Trump effectively cheers Netanyahu on. Trump is an unabashed racist with core values: white supremacy, America First ideology, and hatred of Muslims. His Middle East policy embodies this anti-Muslim stance. In Trump's view, all Muslims are potential extremists ready to launch attacks with headscarves or masks. His dealings with Saudi Arabia and the UAE are purely for their wealth. Courting Pakistan is about gaining intelligence on the Taliban and other groups. Trump sees Jerusalem's control by Islamic nations as a Western humiliation and supports Israel as a proxy to monopolize Jerusalem, effectively returning the holy city to the West. In fact, Trump dislikes Turkey, sharing Putin's resentment over Constantinople's fall. In their minds, the war between Christianity and Islam never ended. If you recall how Britain and France dismantled the Ottoman Empire or Russia's prolonged wars against it, you will understand. One seeks to reclaim Jerusalem, the other Constantinople. But Netanyahu is no fool. He will not serve as the West's guard for free. He aims to expand Israel's controlled territory and establish strategic depth. Thus, crushing Hamas means seizing Gaza, securing the Golan Heights, advancing into Syria's heartland to intimidate Damascus, and striking Yemen's Houthi militia and Lebanon's Hezbollah to dismantle the axis of resistance. This war is meant to assert Israel's dominance, intimidating Islamic nations like Saudi Arabia and Egypt. Israel's greatest fear is Iran acquiring nuclear weapons, so destroying Iran's nuclear facilities is a core objective it will never abandon. Thus, Netanyahu, ignoring the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant, continues expanding the war, his hands stained with civilian blood. Israel's small territory cannot tolerate enemies with nuclear capabilities. Khamenei, however, is a coward. Despite Israel's elimination of Hamas, Hezbollah, operations in Syria, strikes on the Houthis, and assassination of Iran's military leaders, he fantasizes about reconciling with Israel. By groveling to the U.S., he hopes to preserve his rule. Iran's repeated concessions have not softened Israel or the US, but instead paint Iran as a frightened lamb ripe for slaughter. Iran's counterattacks, including this one, are embarrassing and have never inflicted significant damage on Israel. Netanyahu has vowed to destroy Iran's nuclear facilities. With many military leaders eliminated, Iran's chances of defeating Israel are slim. Some ask why China does not help Iran. I think these people are out of their minds. First, ask, does Iran treat China as a friend? Even when India provokes Pakistan, Iran, as Pakistan's neighbor and an Islamic state, does not support Pakistan like Turkey does, but plays both sides. Pakistan is China's true ally. If India, Israel, or any nation fully attacks Pakistan, China will not stand idly by. If Iran aligned its strategy with China, firmly supporting China at critical moments instead of playing both sides, China would surely support Iran. When Israel attacked Gaza, China's foreign ministry clearly condemned Israel. But when Israel struck Iran, China only urged all parties to avoid escalating conflict and seek peace. Is that not clear enough? China is a major power with 1.4 billion people. As long as we remain united internally, we need no external allies. We can confront the US and Western nations alone. If the US dares to attack China, we will utterly destroy it, or at worst, perish together. We are willing to provide weapons, intelligence, and, if necessary, fight to defend the core interests of loyal allies like Pakistan. But we are not foolish enough to fight for a flip-flopping nation like Iran. This issue is similar to whether China should help Russia. China can provide necessary economic aid to prevent Russia's collapse, avoiding a scenario where China faces the West alone. But China will not fight directly for Russia. The reason is simple. Does Russia treat China as a friend? Last year, Russia held celebrations in Vladivostok, commemorating their ancestors' conquest of the Far East. Vladivostok, meaning conquer the East, is known in Chinese as Haitian Way, part of China's historical territory. Russia occupied 1.5 million square kilometers of China's outer northeast, massacred countless Chinese, and erased all traces of Chinese life there. They demand more Chinese aid while celebrating the seizure of Chinese land. Any conscientious Chinese person would despise Russia, let alone me. Consider this. If China were embroiled in a Taiwan Strait war and needed Russia's help, would Russia fight? When China fought the US and Korea for the Soviet Union's sake, the Soviets demanded China buy weapons on loan, leaving China in debt for over a decade after the war. What friendship does China have with such a ruthless nation? The US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, and Europe have thriving Chinatowns. Russia has none. Is it truly China's friend? When Ukraine deals heavy blows to Russia, many Chinese netizens cheer. Chinese people are not fools. The Chinese government supports Russia because of a shared enemy, but we know who the greedy, invasive nation is. Likewise, I admit I am very pro-Israel and despise extremist groups like Hamas. But my conscience tells me Israel's actions in Gaza are genocidal, and I will not cheer for their atrocities despite my personal leanings. I support putting Netanyahu on trial, at least for life imprisonment. I hope Middle Eastern nations and the Islamic world learn from Iran's example. Groveling to the West and Israel is futile. Abandon such fantasies. In the China-US competition, firmly align with China and earn its friendship through actions. As long as China stands, the US could back 10 Israels and still not defeat Islamic nations. But if you try to play both sides, China will treat you impartially, remaining neutral when Israel and the US extort you. I also hope my viewers avoid being confined to one religion or narrow interest. While upholding your nation's interests, ask your conscience if your actions are right. For example, I firmly condemn Hamas's attacks on civilians, but I do not believe Israel has the right to raise Gaza. I once debated a Jewish person praising their impressive military victories. But I asked, is your ruthlessness toward Palestinians fundamentally different from the Nazis who massacred you? He claimed history does not judge winners. I replied, so Hitler's greatest mistake was not killing millions of Jews, but losing the war. He fell silent.